Yeah.
Which one would you like to call to order first?
Let's do the
Roll call.
let's do the bond.
Okay. So roll call for council.
Yeah.
Okay. Council members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Still here.
Najarian. Here. Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here.
And could we have the roll call for the agency, please?
Agency members Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Draymond.
Here.
May we have your report?
One more roll call with your permission. Financing Authority members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Chair Quintero.
Here.
Okay, the agenda for the January 5th, 2010 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council, Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Financing Authority was posted on Thursday, December 31st, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. One is Director of Development Services regarding approval of documents for Central Glendale Redevelopment Project Area Bond Financing. One is Agency Resolution authorizing issuance of sale of tax allocation bonds in an amount not to exceed $30 million and approving related documents and actions. B is Council Resolution authorizing issuance and sale of tax allocation bonds in an amount not to exceed $30,000 and approving related documents and actions. And C is Financing Authority Resolution authorizing the purchase and sale of tax allocation bonds and approving related documents and actions.
30, you meant 30 million.
30 million, I'm sorry.
Mr. Starbird.
Yes, I go to Phil Lanza-Fame for the staff report. Phil?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and the Financing Authority, in November of 2009, the Redevelopment Agency approved a financing plan that provided for $24.5 million of bond proceeds to fund 4 CIP projects, $28 million that would pay for existing city projects, and then another $25 million that would pay for future projects should the agency want to do those. You also authorized preparation of bond documents to issue and to look for an underwriting firm. We are here today to ask you to approve several of these documents so that we can issue the bonds. The official statement is the informational document that describes the bonds, their terms, and the security. The fourth supplement to the indenture of trust, that is something that we have just modified with each bond issue starting in 1990. And then the bond purchase contract, that is the legal document to sell the bonds and purchase by the underwriter. We have put some parameters. Staff believes that having a negotiated transaction is the best structure for this. We have put some parameters on that in the maximum amount of principal, the maximum underwriting fee, and then the maximum interest rate. So we would negotiate for something less than those, but not exceeding any of those numbers. Finally, the government code for the last 25 years, it does not provide for the agency to sell bonds directly to an underwriter, but it does provide and allow, and has been a practice, as I say, for the last 25 years, for the Finance Authority to buy those bonds from the agency and then sell them to the underwriter. That is why you have the motions for the Finance Authority. In summary, this is the bond that would fund the CIP projects that you approved with last year's CIP program. If there's any questions, our financial advisor is here, our bond counsel is here, the underwriters are here from, I should say, Wedbush, which is the underwriter that we are recommending to you.
I have a question. In terms of the 4 projects that we've identified, what happens if perhaps a project comes in at half of what we estimated, or say we change the project, instead of a soccer field in one location, we find another location? Can we still go forward with the
One thing that we did, and certainly in the case if something came in under budget, we did include in our list of projects the Central Avenue improvements that needs to be resurfaced. We were planning to do that with tax increment, fund it through the agency. If we had bond funds left over, we would be able to use them for that.
Well, and I think we should address what if one of the projects fell through and we didn't do it, and say we had a $2 or $3 or $4 million then excess resources by not doing a project. Phil or Suzanne, can you answer that question?
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the Council, Chairman, members of the agency, and members of the Financing Authority. Under the redevelopment law, you are permitted to use the bond proceeds on different projects. We expect that there's a list of projects that we expect you to spend them on, but if for some reason one project fell out, you can identify other capital projects so long as they meet the tax code use of the proceeds. And you have about $25 million, including the $10 million that Mr. Lansfane mentioned about the Central Avenue, but you have about $25 million of projects that probably qualify, so you do have a long list that you would have spent other
The basic
funds on hand.
criteria is it needs to have a redevelopment purpose and have a benefit to the project area. So, and with the public projects Phil mentioned, part of the evaluation we did was to make sure that we can make a finding that they have a benefit to the central project area in order to justify the use of the bond proceeds. And those do. If one of those projects fell through, we'd find other purposes for the money, and you'd have the flexibility to identify a new project or other uses as long as they meet those criteria. Right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Najarian?
Questions? Let's just be clear, Mr. Lansfane, so those people who aren't versed that extensively in municipal finance realize that when we sell these bonds, we are going to be getting in, let's take, for example, the $24.65 million tax-exempt bond. We'll be obtaining that sum from the sale of the bonds. In return, the revenue stream that will pay those bondholders back is our tax increment.
That is correct.
And the tax increment is generated from within the redevelopment areas.
It's within the redevelopment project areas, and we have sized this bond only on existing development. So you are not anticipating any future development to pay for this.
Okay. Are additional things like the park impact fees or additional, as you said, additional developments that go in that generate increment are not obligated to pay these bonds?
Not future. We don't anticipate we would need any of that in the future. There's a typical coverage, that is ratio of revenue in versus your debt service, of 1.25. I think the way we've sized this, it's about 1.8.
So
it's
we
very
have
conservative.
plenty-
Very conservative.
Very conservative. We
Very
haven't
conservative.
used all of our capacity.
I might add in the meetings that I've been involved in with Suzanne and the team and Phil, we've also anticipated a potential downturn and reassessment of the tall buildings downtown, which will have an impact on future tax increment. We've taken that into consideration in a conservative way. We've built in the cushion that Phil has noted on top of that, so that we make sure that we're going to be comfortable with the debt service and the future tax increment off of the existing development. I will also add that we have in the past had individuals who have commented that any kind of debt seems to be bad, and they kind of play on the public perception that taking on debt is a bad thing. As it relates to redevelopment, as it does with other financings for public agencies, debt, only when used in an irresponsible way, is a bad thing. In the case of redevelopment, it is the way you finance your ability to reinvest your increment capital back into your project area. It is literally the foundational way in which redevelopment agencies in California generate capital to reinvest. And state law provides that you can utilize tax increment for the repayment of debt. It doesn't indicate you can use it for operational purposes, generally for programs. It has to be for the repayment of debt, either through contracts, bond sizing, or other ways in which the agency can commit its resources. This is a very traditional way of raising capital to invest today to benefit the future while relying on just the current tax increment and being very conservative about that.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Dreeman.
Just another comment that is of a housekeeping nature, because I've had several people ask me, why are we talking about just the central area rather than, say, the San Fernando?
each project area you generates its own tax increment. The projects that we were talking about that are being funded, that were in our financial plan, are all located or benefit the central redevelopment project area. We've looked at San Fernando, and we are still recovering from the early 90s to try and generate enough increment where we would have a sizable bond to do something. We simply aren't there yet. But in this particular issue, the projects that were identified in our CIP are all located within or close to the central project area and benefit that project area.
What would be our bonding capacity related to the San Fernando area at this point?
Today, using our cash flow, we've estimated, given our current obligations, about $10 million.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one card, Mike Mohill.
Thank you, Mayor Quintero, council members. Before I start, may I ask for a couple, since I'm going to probably be the only person who will be talking against the bond, may I have a couple extra minutes to speak on it?
Got 3 minutes.
I'm asking for a few extra minutes.
Well, get going and let's see.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In December 2009, council recommended a $28 million bond with interest of $4 million to include $3 million of a neon art museum. Now I read that the whole package will include another $1.5 million for the passageway on Brand. Thus, we're looking at a $4.5 million, and the public is to assume that this questionable item is supposed to bring in money for the city and to help make Glendale a destination place. In the Glendale News Press, dated January the 4th, 2010, headlined, "News is that $29 million bond. We are told that the bond market has improved, and therefore this will be a great time to pass the bond. All to be paid by tax increment financing." I did some research this morning, and I have 3 documents taken from the pros and the cons of the tax increment financing. A. Council members, did you know that this kind of municipal financing started back in the state of California back in 1952? And almost every state in the union did this method of financing, especially local government, since they often do not get enough money either from the state or the federal government to finance pet projects of the different council people. The TIF tool is to use future gains in taxes to finance current improvements. In essence, borrowing money to pay the needs a municipality wants today and cannot wait for the normal sources of revenue. Some critics will argue this is another way that the local government has circumvented Proposition 13. The curse of local government who want to spend and spend without sufficient money in the coffers. The process leads to favoritism for politically connected developers, lawyers, economic development directors, and others interested parties. Conclusion. The impact of the tax increment financing on growth in property value requires a careful reading of the evidence. 2. Research has shown that commercial tax increment financing districts tend to decrease commercial development in the non-TIF portion of the municipality. In today's agenda document states the bond will be $30 million. How did this bond that you want the public to inhale go from $28 million to $30 million in just a couple of weeks? Mr. Chairman, you have said that the bonds are, quote, this is Mr. Draymond said in the paper, I'm sorry, this is the loan. We talk as though we aren't supposed to do this sort of thing. In a normal household, you pay on time for one of the things around the house that are major projects. Mr. Draymond, in your letter, comment in the Glendale News Press, which I'm quoting here, these are not normal times. Unless the rest of the council are wearing blinders, these are not normal times. Just look around and you'll see all the empty buildings, empty tenants, in the Central Business District. Last count was about 15%, and limited new development in the Central Business District. Actual unemployment in the city is probably approaching 15% or more. Foreclosures continue to rise for both residential and commercial properties. Look at the number of bankruptcies there are in the city and the country as a whole. No more Circuit City, no more Mervyn's, no more To Die restaurant, and no more as developers of all properties are suffering. People are not making major purchases for big-ticket items like cars or housing without government assistance. Even the Americana had to lower their selling prices on their condos and rentals to below cost in order to sell or lease. The high cost of living in this state and the city of Glendale
Wrapping it up, Mr. Mohill,
has forced many residents to flee this area. The quality of life. We still have to deal with CalPERS, the big elephant in the room. As expected, the federal government continues to paint a rosy picture for the future, but just look around at the blood on the streets, the poor people, the poor management. Council members, just who will pay for the failure of the bond obligation? You got it, the remaining local taxpayers. I was at the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council last night, and several members came up to me and in conversation asked if we're going to have a bond for the Neon Museum, better that we also include the much-deserved $6 million Pacific Park swimming pool. Why must our southern residents, who are low income with limited resources, have to go another year without a local swimming pool for the summer?
Okay.
Others said, why make it $30 million? Why not we make it a $200 million and we can build a whole new city? Please take a second look before you make the decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
And here are some documents. Here's home values of the skids, 2010. Another article in the LA
You've
Times.
exceeded your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Okay, just lots of things to talk about. Let me just say the bond money would be spent at the Central Park, which is in southern portion of the city, Columbus Soccer Field near low-income neighborhoods, and the Central Library Project, among other uses. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay.
Want some motions?
Mr. Lansfane?
I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, so that there isn't any question, there is no additional tax or fee on any of the property owners. They pay their normal property tax just like they would were there a bond or not a bond. And I think we've demonstrated to you the conservativeness of this structure so that we don't run into problems. And that's the way we've looked at all of our financings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lansfane. Do I have Mr. Weaver?
Make a motion for the agency at 1A.
Second.
Roll call.
Agency, like roll call, Mr. Chair.
That's Mr. Draymond's line.
Yes.
Agency members Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chairman Draymond.
Yes.
I'll move 1B for the council.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
And for the Finance Authority, I'll move 1C.
Second.
Roll call.
Finance Authority members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Chair Quintero.
Yes. Mr. Draymond.
Mr. Mayor, if you would forgive me for just a moment, I wanted to ask the city clerk, it's just a housekeeping issue. Would the Finance Authority normally be included where the roll call information is on the agenda? I think that
We follow the direction from the City Attorney's Office, so we've been instructed to. Yeah.
is not on here. At least not on my copy. Or the agenda. In other words, where it calls for roll call for the city, roll call for the redevelopment agency, that's it on mine.
Oh, you must have it. It's interesting. Is that it's on mine?
Not on mine. Special, apparently. Yeah, this is different from my packet.
Interesting.
Well, maybe that's because you are different.
Perhaps.
Is that?
Of course. I showed him mine.
Thank you, Mr. Kasaki. Appreciate that.
Motions to adjourn?
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn for the council.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Move to adjourn for the redevelopment agency.
Second.